the path forward. The Senate hearings are over for Supreme Court nominee Judge Amy Coney Barrett. We have a report and analysis of what comes next. Staying busy, where President Donald Trump and Democratic candidate Joe Biden are headed with the election less than 3 weeks away. Protecting the Pope. Troubling news about the health of several members of the Vatican's Swiss Guard. We have a report from Rome. And faith and politics. A member of Congress from Ohio tells us why he fights so hard for the unborn. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, October 16th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Judge Amy Coney Barrett has until Tuesday night to answer written questions from the Senate Judiciary Committee. And despite opposition from Democrats, the Senate Majority Leader is confident that she will be confirmed next week. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales looks back at key points from this week's hearing.
In calm and measured tones, Judge Amy Coney Barrett answered 3 days of senators' questions, challenged by Democrats.
Is Roe a super precedent?
I'm answering a lot of questions about Roe, which I think indicates that Roe doesn't fall in that category. And scholars across the spectrum say that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled. But descriptively, it does mean that it's not a case that everyone has accepted.
Will you commit to recusing yourself from any case arising from a dispute in the presidential election results?
I certainly hope that all members of the committee have more confidence in my integrity than to think that I would allow myself to be used as a pawn to decide this election for the American people.
And supported by Republicans.
Chief Justice Roberts reminded all of us recently that we do not have Obama judges or Trump judges, Bush judges, or Clinton judges.
On the final day, witnesses shared their opinions, including one of Judge Barrett's former law students.
Anyone who has interacted with her knows that she is a woman of her word. To this day, I do not know what Judge Barrett did to solve my problem, itself a testament to her humility. All I know is that the technology arrived promptly, which in turn allowed me to excel and to place me in a position that would eventually allow me to apply for a clerkship on the Supreme Court.
The committee will vote on Judge Barrett's nomination October 22nd. Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
President Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden both returned to the campaign trail today after holding separate town hall events last night. The presidential nominees are trying to appeal to voters with just 18 days until the election.
I'm moving heaven and earth to safeguard our seniors from the China virus, to deliver life-saving therapies in record time, and to distribute a safe and effective vaccine before the end of the year. Seniors will be the first in line for the vaccine.
President Trump started the day in Florida, where he talked about protecting America's seniors. Later tonight, he is scheduled to hold a Make America Great Again rally in Georgia. Meanwhile, Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden took his campaign to Michigan today to discuss affordable health care.
We all know the terrible price this nation has paid. Lives lost, unemployment way up. Across Michigan and the country, folks are worried about making their next rent payment or mortgage payment.
Newly released numbers show the Biden campaign outraised the Trump campaign in September by more than $100 million. Joe Biden is also ahead in national polls and in many swing state polls. Joining me now is Allie Pardo, Trump 2020 Deputy Communications Director. Allie, great to have you on. So we just heard about the Biden campaign's strong September fundraising. It does coincide with the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. What role do you think the nation's highest court and the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett are playing in the 2020 election?
Well, I think we're seeing a similar role into what it played in 2016, which is that the American people want a strong constitutional conservative on the Supreme Court. They want a president who will put those people on the Supreme Court. This president has proven that he will do that. Amy Coney Barrett is extremely qualified. I don't think there's anybody who would argue that, and she's going to make a fantastic Supreme Court justice. I think the American people are excited about that, and we continue to see our excitement on the road when the president is at that rally. And we already have lines in Macon, Georgia, and we continue to see a very, very excited base across the country.
Allie, what do you think Judge Barrett showed the American people during hearings this week, and what stood out the most to you?
Well, I mean, as a female, as a Catholic, I will tell you that I was inspired about how she can be such a great mom, so true to her faith, but also so true to her profession. She is an honest, kind, intelligent person. I think she inspires me, and she's going to inspire generations of young girls who want to be able to get into the workforce and to be the best of the best, because that's exactly what she is.
When the president talks about his accomplishments in his first term, he always mentions the high number of judges and Supreme Court justices that have been confirmed, that is. Can you talk about why that's so important?
Well, the president did his job. For years, we saw vacancies on courts across the country. They weren't being filled. They weren't getting nominated, or they weren't being filled by the Senate. This president has worked with Leader McConnell to ensure that we are filling those vacancies, that we have strong conservative judges filling the courts, and to make sure that they're upholding the rule of law and following the Constitution as it was written and as it was supposed to be implemented. And so we have those judges in the courts now, and this president has done a fantastic job to make sure laws are followed and followed correctly moving forward.
Well, Allie, we don't have a lot of time left, but any final thoughts when it comes to Judge Barrett and the election?
Well, I was just so impressed with her this week. I was so impressed with her performance, her breadth of knowledge, and I hope that folks who didn't have a time to watch her hearings and sit around all day have the opportunity to go back, listen to it, listen to the testimony of someone like Laura, her former student, and really get a better understanding and grasp of what an amazing woman we are about to have on the Supreme Court.
Well, Allie, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Allie Pardo, Trump 2020 Deputy Communications Director. Thanks again, Allie. And coming up later in the show, more analysis on the hearings for Judge Amy Coney Barrett from Robert George, McCormick Professor of Jurisprudence and Director of the James Madison Program in American Ideals and Institutions at Princeton University. The group in defense of Christians is demanding the U.S. government put more pressure on Turkey. During a press conference today, the organization said Turkey is violating international religious freedom and is providing state-sponsored Christian persecution. Correspondent Mark Irons reports.
Advocates for Christians in the Middle East say it's past time to sanction Turkey.
If we cannot take a stand at this point, when churches are being bombed, when civilians are being bombed, where there is no end in sight.
During a press call today, the group In Defense of Christians claimed the president of Turkey is waging a holy war against the Christian faith. It also noted that French President Emmanuel Macron has confirmed that Turkey has transported jihadists into Azerbaijan from Syria.
What we really do see is that Turkey is on the warpath, and it's going to get worse as Erdogan tries to deflect attention from his own failing economy.
The group says it took U.S. sanctions to ultimately secure the release of Pastor Andrew Brunson, a U.S. Christian pastor who had been held in a Turkish prison until his release in 2018. Now, in order for Turkey and President Erdogan to give any relief to Christians, IDC says the Trump administration and Congress must bring back sanctions.
But the U.S. needs to respond with a clear-throated, sober position. Politics are always going to be politics, but this is bigger than politics. This has civilizational implications.
We're just hoping to bring awareness.
Advocates for Middle East Christians called for action earlier this summer as well, when Turkey reconverted the Hagia Sophia, a holy site and museum, back into a mosque. In Washington, Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
China is rapidly increasing the number of people getting its experimental coronavirus vaccine. One city is offering a vaccine being developed by Sinovac. It is in the final stage of clinical testing, but not yet approved. Another Chinese vaccine company is offering its vaccines free of charge to students who study abroad. In total, more than 168,000 people have signed up to get vaccines. 7 more Vatican Swiss guards have tested positive for the coronavirus. On Monday, the Holy See confirmed 4 members had been diagnosed with COVID-19. The Swiss guards are in charge of protecting the Pope. Joining us now is EWTN Newsroom correspondent Colin Flynn. Colin, thanks so much for joining us. What more can you tell us about this story?
Good evening, Tracy. On Monday, it was announced that 4 members of the Pontifical Swiss Guard had contracted COVID-19. Now that number is up to 11. In a statement released yesterday, it said that the isolation of positive cases had been arranged immediately and appropriate further steps have been taken. Now, we reached out to the Swiss Guard looking for a statement on the well-being and health of these individuals, but are still waiting a response. And you may remember a number of weeks ago, we showed you those images on the show of 38 new members of the Swiss Guard being sworn in at a special event here in the Vatican behind me. And at that event, the Pope was in attendance. Now, the Swiss Guard were not wearing masks and the Pontiff was not wearing a face mask either. They did keep their distance, though. It's important to point out as well, that event did happen before Vatican City State, which is its own independent state within Italy, introduced new rules making the wearing of face masks mandatory at all times, indoors and outdoors within the walls of Vatican City State.
Colin, earlier this week you reported the positive cases in Italy were rising very quickly. What's the current situation at the moment?
Yeah, Tracy, that's right. We brought you this news earlier in the week that on Tuesday, these new rules took effect nationwide, and some of them included rules like now restaurants and bars must close at midnight. They must stop serving food and beverages outdoor at 9 p.m. All non-contact sports, including football, is prohibited for the next 30 days. And baptisms, marriages, events church-related are limited to 30 people. But yesterday, it was announced that the number of new positive cases of COVID-19 across Italy has now reached 8,804. That's just in the space of 24 hours. And that number is significant because it is an all-time new high. Now, think back to March when this pandemic was at its height here in Italy. The peak number in one day then was 6,557. So the number has jumped dramatically. But you have to remember this as well, that they are carrying out more coronavirus tests than ever before since the beginning of this pandemic. The Higher Health Institute and the Ministry for Health here in Italy have said that the pandemic has reached an acute stage as it goes into its 10th consecutive week of rising numbers.
Well, Colin, definitely something we will be keeping our eye on. I want to get to some other Vatican news. The Apostolic Nuncio to Syria met with diplomats. What did they discuss?
Yes, Tracy, this is staying with coronavirus news as well, I suppose, albeit in a different regime and the devastating effects that it is happening. The Apostolic Nuncio to Syria, Cardinal Mario Zenari, he met with diplomats in the Vatican where he urged them to do all that they can to help the plight of people in Syria. He said that 11 million Syrians are now in need of immediate humanitarian assistance. He said after 10 years of war that the people of Syria have been hit with a poverty bomb as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. He went on to say that he feels that Syria is off the media radar now, and he urged these diplomats to use everything in their power to put the spotlight back on the suffering of the Syrian people and to do everything that they could to direct humanitarian aid towards the country. Now, according to the United Nations, they say that Syria, which has a population of 17.5 million people, is facing an unprecedented hunger crisis.
Colin Flynn, EWTN Newsroom correspondent. Thank you so much, Colin.
Thank you, Tracy.
The official logo and website have been unveiled for the next World Youth Day. World Youth Day will take place in Lisbon, Portugal in August 2023. Pope Francis chose Portugal because he wants the Blessed Virgin to be at the center of the international meeting with young people. The country is the site of the Shrine of Our Lady of Fatima. 42 years ago today, Polish Cardinal Karol Wojtyła was elected as Pope and would take the name of John Paul II. Churches around the world are celebrating the anniversary. He had a profound influence on a generation of Catholics and was a strong voice against injustice and oppression. Pope St. John Paul II is also credited with helping to bring down the atheistic Soviet Union. Coming up, the Archdiocese of Los Angeles unveils an initiative to address social issues important to the faithful. As we mentioned earlier, a vote is expected next week in the confirmation process of Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court, a Catholic and mother of 7. Joining us now by Skype to talk more about this is Robert George McCormick, professor of jurisprudence and director of the James Madison Program in American Ideals and Institutions at Princeton University. Robbie, welcome back. Always great to be with you. As we know, there has been a lot of talk about this nomination and confirmation process and how it should wait until maybe after the presidential election. Some Democratic senators even call this hearing a sham. Does the president have the right to nominate someone for the Supreme Court so close to the election?
Oh, yes. Constitutionally, there's not any question about it. And the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg affirmed the same thing during the Obama years. The president is elected for a full 4-year term. The president doesn't cease being president until the end of that term, which will be in January of next year. If the president's reelected, he gets another term. If not, a new president takes office. But while the president is serving, the president has the full powers of the president under the Constitution, and that includes the power to nominate judges and justices at all levels of the federal judiciary.
You and I have talked before about Judge Barrett's Catholic faith coming under scrutiny by some who felt could impact her judicial decisions. And while her faith, for the most part, didn't come under criticism during the hearings yesterday, Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein appeared to be caught on a so-called hot mic saying that Judge Barrett's pro-life views are, quote, deeply personal and come with her religion. What do you make of that?
Well, the Catholic faith is a pro-life faith. That's true. What she said is true. I hope it's certainly true. Catholics, unfortunately, like Vice President Biden, who are not pro-life, are not being faithful to the teachings of the church. They're not being faithful to what they themselves proclaim to be committed to. The problem with Senator Feinstein's comments isn't that she is saying accurately that Amy Coney Barrett is pro-life. Of course she's pro-life. She's made that plain, and that her pro-life convictions reflect her faith, although we who are Catholic don't believe you have to be Catholic to be pro-life, and many of our non-Catholic fellow citizens, even some of our unbelieving fellow citizens, those who don't even believe in God, are still pro-life because they understand that human life is a profound thing, a great human good, something that's not to be trifled with. And so the deliberate killing of innocent human beings is wrong. Where Feinstein got into trouble was her earlier comment, in which she proclaimed, she said actually to Judge Barrett, the dogma lives loudly within you, virtually accusing her of planning to bring her faith to bear inappropriately in saying what the law is. As a judge, it is not Amy Coney Barrett or any other judge's role to legislate or to bring their personal philosophical or religious beliefs to bear in saying what the law is. They're supposed to give effect to the law as written. If they can't do that, they should recuse themselves or resign. These are just well-established principles. Catholics are well aware of them. They've been in place forever, and Catholic judges understand the difference between their role as judges and the role of, say, a legislator. So what was disturbing was Feinstein's earlier comment suggesting that because Amy Coney Barrett is a Catholic, she could not be faithful to her oath to uphold the Constitution as written. And that is really what this controversy is about.
Robbie, we don't have a lot of time, but I do want to get to this question. Senator Lindsey Graham is quoted as saying, this is the first time in American history that we have nominated a woman who is unashamedly pro-life and embraces her faith without apology, and she is going to the court. What do you think of that statement? And do you think that Judge Barrett will be confirmed to the Supreme Court?
I believe she will be confirmed. She was spectacular in her confirmation hearings, very winning. It was obvious to the entire country that the woman is brilliant, that she's dedicated, that she has just the kind of temperament you're looking for at a judge, in a judge. She is even-tempered, dispassionate, someone who's willing to consider all the competing arguments that are placed before her. So she's going to be confirmed, I'm certain. As to the question of this being the first time that we will have confirmed for the Supreme Court a woman who is unashamedly, outspokenly pro-life, That's just a fact. That's just true. There have been 4 women on the Supreme Court. 2 of them are currently serving. The first was Sandra Day O'Connor. She was a Republican, but she was not pro-life. During her time as a legislator in Arizona, she made clear that she was not pro-life. Nothing in her record indicated that she was pro-life, and in fact, she wasn't. Of course, the 3 Democratic female nominees, Ginsburg, Sotomayor, and Kagan, give no quarter to the pro-life position. They're not pro-life, don't claim to be pro-life. So this will be the first time at the Supreme Court level that we will have a female justice who is in fact plainly, outspokenly pro-life.
Well, Robbie, thank you so much for your time. We always appreciate your analysis.
Thank you.
Up next, a congressman talks about his long relationship with Henry Hyde, father of a measure to protect the unborn. In recognition of Respect Life Month, the largest archdiocese in the country has unveiled a 5-week initiative to address everything from ending abortion to combating loneliness. The Archdiocese of Los Angeles, in conjunction with the nearby Diocese of Orange, kicked off its webinar series earlier this month, highlighting subjects that are currently impacting the community and the world. Joining us now is Kathleen Buckley Domingo, Director of the Office of Life, Justice, and Peace of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Kathleen, welcome to the show. Good to have you on. Tell us a little bit more about the initiative and why the Archdiocese started it.
So this year, Respect Life Month is different than we've ever experienced before. And we're really trying to understand what our families who have been at home now for almost 7 months are experiencing and what their needs are. And we decided that we would create resources specifically for them and find out what they're looking for. So resources about mental health, resources about racism and the pro-life movement, things like that are the topics of conversation in our families.
Kathleen, what's the response been so far?
People have been loving the format. We've been sending home resources for discussion for even children in the elementary grades to share with their families about some of these really difficult topics of the day. And then, of course, we have webinars that the adults and older children can join to have these conversations with a Catholic perspective, again, through that lens of Respect Life Month and the dignity of every human person.
Kathleen, you mentioned some of the topics that are going to be discussed in the webinars. What are some of the other topics and why you felt they were important to address?
We know a lot of people right now are very concerned about mental health, especially for our children who remain out of school in LA County and in California. And so we have a lot of resources for people who are combating loneliness and are concerned that their children have good socialization. How can we do that virtually? How can we do that in our families? How can we do that as people of faith?
Let's talk about some of the speakers and who we can expect to hear from.
Last week, we started off with a bang with Gloria Purvis, who is EWTN's own morning show host. She was wonderful. She talked about the intersection of the racial justice movement and the pro-life movement, all based on the dignity of the person. And coming up, we have Aaron Cariotti, who is a psychology professor at UC Irvine. He's been talking to us about frontline workers and how he is helping families, people who have been suffering with COVID, and also those working in the healthcare industry.
Well, Kathleen, thank you so much for coming on and telling us all about this initiative. We really appreciate it. Kathleen Buckley Domingo, Director of the Office of Life, Justice, and Peace of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Thank you again.
Thank you.
In tonight's Faith and Politics series, Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales sits down with U.S. Congressman Steve Chabot. He has served as the representative of Ohio's 1st Congressional District since 1994, and he credits his Catholic faith for shaping the course of his life and his life's work.
Congressman Steve Chabot grew up in a traditional Catholic family. He attended parochial school, was in the church choir, and was even an altar boy. He tells me that the greatest influence on his Catholic faith came from watching the habits of his older brother, Ron.
I was always inspired by he was just a real decent person, a great guy.
Congressman Chabot's brother, Ron, was 6 years older. He went directly from Catholic high school into the seminary. but decided to leave because he wanted to get married and have a family. Despite the two of them having polar opposite political views, Congressman Shabbat says he always had his back.
He was very liberal, more liberal even than a Democrat, if that's possible, and I'm about as conservative as a Republican as there are, but we always got along great. He did vote for me. I think I was the only Republican he ever voted for.
Throughout the years, Congressman Shabbat has worked with a number of lawmakers. As chairman of the Constitution Subcommittee, he introduced the ban on partial birth abortions.
We saved tens of thousands of lives every year by that legislation.
He says, unfortunately, today there are a lot of other types of abortions that go on, and he blames Planned Parenthood.
They eliminate the population of the city of Cincinnati that I represent every year. So it's just horrific to think what one organization, the devastation that they've wrought in this country. And that's why we should absolutely not allow any of our tax dollars to go there to promote abortions.
Congressman Shabbat has been an outspoken critic of Planned Parenthood's acceptance of millions of dollars in PPP small business loans. He says they should return the money.
Absolutely, without question.
Congressman Shabbat says he will never forget a conversation he had with his colleague, the late Illinois representative and pro-life champion, Henry Hyde.
When I die and I'm before my maker, it'll be a terrifying time. He'll know everything about me. But then I'll hear beautiful voices singing that are unknown in this world. And these are the voices of the unborn. Henry used to say that, and I thought that was very inspiring.
I asked Congressman Shabbat if he has a message for the younger generation. He told me faith is important, and it will help Americans get beyond all the uncertainties we are facing at this time. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.